Hi. So we're live right now. This is our first live Monday with Marie, and I want to thank everybody who's here and attending. And so today's topic, we're going to be talking about a couple of things, and we've got some really great questions, and we're going to be really respectful of the time. So we are going to go right until 10, maybe a little bit before 10. We'll close out. So our first question comes from Millie, actually. Millie doesn't say where she's from. And her question is around virtual confidence. So Millie is a salesperson and she is struggling with how to have virtual sales conversations. So Millie, this is a really great question in terms of how do you sell when you're on this type of platform? And I think a lot of people have that question. And so one of the things that you need to think about is that think about using mail. So if you've got a product or a service that someone has to physically touch, if you've got samples that you can send to them prior to the meeting, that's a great way to make sure that you're actually able to do that sort of touch situation with your products. So small samples that you can send beforehand, and then on the platform that you choose to use, whether it's Zoom or Teams or whatever the platform is, use that platform to be able to talk about the product. Now, let's say you're selling a service, not necessarily a product, so you're not really able to actually have someone touch and feel the product. What I would recommend in that situation actually is that when you're having a conversation, the sales conversation, think about it this way. Your first meeting with someone is not a sales conversation. It's a get to know you conversation. And I like to use the analogy of dating because I think a lot of times people, because we've all dated, we can kind of relate to this. And so think about it this way. Your first date, you're not going to ask someone to marry them. Your first date, you're really going to get to know them and find out what interests you have in common and sort of just get to know them and see if this is something that you would like to go on a second date with. So with that being said, when you're thinking about like how you connect with a potential client, think about it as simple as that first meeting. I just want to get to know them. So the questions really need to be a little bit about their business, a little bit about them personally, a little bit about some of the things that they might be interested in. And so that way that can really help you figure out exactly some more information about that person. So that's what I would recommend in terms of your virtual confidence. And then just be yourself on this platform. I think what's kind of distracting for people is that they sort of see themselves in a way that they normally don't. So if you think about when you have a conversation with someone, you're not actually looking at yourself. So it's a little bit difficult to have that moment where you're like, okay, well now I'm looking at people and they're looking at me, and so that's kind of weird. So if you're using like Zoom, for example, a great way to use it is to actually turn off the viewing of yourself in the platform. So that way you're only seeing the person that you're speaking to, which is what you do naturally in conversation. I mean, we don't walk around with mirrors and kind of watch ourselves while we're talking. So that might be another way that that can help you. So Millie, I hope that helps. I hope that answers your question. And for anybody that's out there right now watching, feel free to put in your questions. I've got some questions that people have sent. And so I think it's really important for all of us to be able to it's important for all of us to be able to talk to each other and have these conversations. So my next question, so let me just pull really quickly off of this, comes from Trade. Oh, that's an interesting name, Trade. So Trade wants to know about how to have some meetings online with his team. So Trade says, my team and I have been working remotely now through the entire pandemic, and we've got some questions on how we can have more meaningful meetings because it seems like our meetings are getting kind of dry and boring. And hi, Jackie, how are you? So Trade's question is really kind of a great question. So how do we have meaningful meetings on a platform that people are kind of getting burnt out on? A couple of things, and people are stopped turning on their video. So that's another issue. A couple of things to do is to think about this the way Patrick Lencioni always talks about this platform, which I love how he talks about this platform. He calls it not a meeting platform, but a virtual connection platform, a place that you can connect with people. So if you think about it in those terms, that kind of shifts your idea of having a meeting in terms of just information dissemination to actually how do we connect and work together. So tip number one is always send an agenda with the meeting request so that people know exactly what the meeting's going to be about before they accept the meeting. I think that's kind of important to do. Tip number two, make sure that you are not only having that agenda set up for someone, but also that you're also looking at what are the ways that people can contribute to the agenda? What are the issues that other people can speak so it doesn't feel like it becomes this monologue, but it's actual dialogue and conversation? The other is when you're inviting people to the meeting, think about who you're inviting in terms of if I don't need your input at this meeting, then I don't need to invite you. Even if you may have a title that makes the meeting feel more important, I may not need you. So it might be a case of, I'd love to invite you to this meeting, but right now we're in the beginning stages of the meeting. So let me invite you later on. So that's another thing that you can think of when you're thinking about the meeting platform. And then the third thing that you want to think about when you're thinking about meetings and how to deal with meetings is that you might want to consider having a time where at the beginning of the meeting, people can actually talk about some things that are going on with them. This week, for example, is Children's Mental Health Week. And one of the things that's been really critical right now, good morning, G. One of the things that have been really critical right now with children are dealing with remote learning and COVID. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, but for right now, that might be a great topic to open up the meeting with. If you have people who have children or who are having children in their homes, or they have family members who have children, you might want to talk about how's that going? You know, how are the kids feeling? You know, how are you feeling with having to work and deal with kids? It's a big topic, and it's a nice icebreaker, so to speak, in terms of connecting with people and getting to know people. So that's my recommendation, Trade, and I hope that helps. Remember, if you've got any questions or comments, love to have you post in the Facebook chat, and I'm happy to answer those. So as I said and alluded to, this week is Children's Mental Health Week. And what's important about that is that a lot of kids are really struggling with virtual learning. And it's of all ages, teenagers specifically, because they're losing that connection with their classmates. They're losing the ability to go play sports and have those physical activities. And so that can lead to a lot of depression. Not only that, but during those teenage years, our hormones are changing. And so part of that can also lead to having even more depression from the isolation. So one of the things that we can do for kids is really not just talk to them about how's school going, but really how are you feeling about not being able to physically see your friends or physically be able to go to school and hang out with the other kids at school, because they're feeling very isolated. And a lot of times they don't know how to articulate that isolation. So this week, one of the things that you want to think about is reach out to someone who has children or your own children or your nieces and nephews or godchildren if you don't necessarily have those, and talk to them about how to be able to connect with other kids, giving them some creative ideas of how to use the virtual platforms to connect with their friends. Maybe it's playing games online. Maybe it's encouraging them in the middle of the day to actually reach out and talk to someone online just to connect and see how they're doing. Also, it's a great opportunity to begin to teach children about emotional intelligence. I think a lot of times we think emotional intelligence is just for adults, but if you start young with people, really teaching them about emotional intelligence and helping them understand what does that actually mean, that can really help them begin to be able to explain how they feel. And the best way to do that is to talk about how you feel right now being isolated, instead of just sort of saying, pushing them to try to articulate how they feel. It's great to just say, you know what, sometimes I feel like I'm not connected to my friends, or I'm not connected to my work friends, or other family members, because I'm at home and it's really feels uncomfortable for me to try to do this in a virtual platform. So that might be a great way to sort of help with that. So I hope you kind of think about those tips. Think about this week what you can do for a small person who might be really struggling with the virtual world. And remember, this week is Children's Mental Health Awareness Week. So if there are other platforms that you can kind of sponsor and help other people, please do that. That's always important. So we have another question that's come in, and this question is actually from Regina. And Regina wants to know about, how do I rebuild connections with people that I may not have spoken to for a long time? Well, Regina, this is actually a great opportunity to do that now, with more people online, with Facebook, with LinkedIn, with Clubhouse, which is another online social media platform, and with just different streaming activities. It's a great opportunity to look up old friends and try to reconnect with them. We know that most of us are at home, and if you're in the Midwest or in the East Coast right now, you know that you're surrounded by snow, so you're really at home today if you're lucky not to have to drive into work. So think about in terms of being able to sort of connect with people in that way. Just pick up a phone. I know it's kind of crazy. We can still talk to people over the phone. Can you believe it? So sometimes it's good to just pick up a phone and have a conversation and just say, I know it's been a long time since we've connected, but I'd love to know how you're doing and how things are going. I figure you're probably snowed in like I am, so I thought it'd be a good day to talk to you and see what's going on. So that's another thing that you can do in terms of being able to reconnect. So Regina, I hope that helps. You're probably not online right now, but when you watch this later, I hope that actually helps. So one of the other things that I wanted to talk about today, I have a couple more questions, but I want to kind of mix it up a little bit, is really talking about having the ability to do some fun things with actual stuff that you have at home. I think we focus so much on technology being about how do we use the tech, and we don't think about some of the old school ways that we can use technology. So whiteboards are a really great sort of tip to be able to use for this technology, going back to the meetings question. So if you can think about how you can use actual whiteboards that people can hold up, that they can then answer questions, which forces people to turn the cameras on. Hint, hint, because I know a lot of people are tired of having their cameras on. So that's a great way to have people connect. So instead of them writing in the chat, but just using that whiteboard. So think about how you can use some tools at home. I know a lot of people talk about scavenger hunts are a fun way to do things for meetings and things like that. But another way is, bring your pet to work, or, have your kid come into work. So at the beginning of the meeting, you can introduce your kids if they're at home, or if your pets are at home. I know a lot of people have pets. I have a pet as well. So it's always fun for people to sort of meet your pet. So that's another way that you can kind of jazz up the meeting and make it more interesting. So think about it in those terms. All right, so let's see. I have another question here. This question is from Sarah, and Sarah wants to know, I'm really struggling with how to get my team to open up in our one-on-one meetings. So Sarah, that's a really great question about one-on-one meetings. And so one of the things that I recommend doing for one-on-one meetings is having your team do a little pre-work. So sending them a couple of questions that you want them to reflect on. That way they already know what questions you'll be asking, and then they'll begin to start thinking about how to open up. I think a lot of times with one-on-one meetings, people freeze up because they need time to think about the question that you've asked them. and they don't have that time. So sending it early sort of helps as well. The other thing that you can do in one-on-one meetings, which a lot of times leaders don't think about, is that you open up first. I think a lot of times people do have questions about the people that manage them or their team leads. So one of the things that I do is that I have a meeting where it's, ask Marie anything you want. So within reason, of course, but seriously, I will have people come in and say, if you ever had a question that you've been dying to ask me and you've not felt comfortable, I'm willing to answer that question. And so telling them that in advance helps them to then be able to come in with some questions. And I've had interesting questions asked of me. I've had people ask me why I actually started working for the company that I was working at. Or I've had people ask me basic questions as to, why did we decide to change this policy over this policy? So a lot of times they're policy questions, a lot of times they're technical questions, and a lot of times they're just personal questions. Like people have been curious about, do I have kids, or do I have, other family around, or things like that. They're just curious about their leader personally. So I think as long as you set the parameters of what you're comfortable with having them ask you about, then it should be fine that way. So think about that. Think about the fact that you can always open up first, and that makes it a little bit more comfortable in those one-on-one meetings. The other thing is that having regular one-on-one meetings helps those meetings become a little bit more targeted. And so what I mean by that is that instead of having annual performance reviews, which I hate that. I hate the concept of that. I want to ban those things for life. So I'm going to start a movement of no annual performance review meetings. So join me on that movement. But I think it's important to have quarterly review meetings. And those quarterly review meetings, you can really talk about the things that people have accomplished that quarter and also what they plan to accomplish the next quarter. That feels a little bit more authentic to people because now they're getting information that's not just about what I did the entire year, but it covers those 90 days and how I'm going to move forward in the next 90 days. The other thing that I would recommend is that having touch points every week with your team members. And I know a lot of managers always push back and they say, well, I have a lot of team members. Well, then you might want to think about how to restructure that. But the truth is people need to talk to you at least once a week so that they know that you see them, that they know that you care about them, and that they know that you know what's going on with them. And so that once a week minimum touch point is really important for team members. So I would highly recommend that as an added sort of suggestion there. And I hope that answers your question, Sarah, about the one-on-one meetings. They can be a great resource in terms of just getting to know people and connecting with people. And I would suggest that if you're talking about salary increases or anything to do with money, having a separate meeting for that conversation that's not tied to what I did and what I didn't do. So that way people are focused on really developing themselves, and then the money conversation is separate. Oh, wow. I just got a text question that came in, which is really interesting, from Tony. And Tony wants to know, what platform am I using to go live? So I'm actually using a platform called StreamYard. And so it allows you to go live in multiple places. Not a commercial for StreamYard, but that's kind of funny, Tony, that you texted that question. So thank you for that. And that's the platform that I'm using. All right, so let me pull out another question that we have here. It's kind of fun being able to just answer random questions that people have. This question, I'll take this one. This question is from D, and D wants to know, I've got a coworker that's really difficult to talk to. I struggle with connecting with this coworker, and I struggle with coming up with conversation. What can I do to improve the conversation with this coworker? Well, Dee, I think that's an interesting one. I think we all have this case where we all have a coworker that we just don't connect with. Like it's just difficult because we have nothing in common with them. And I think you need to give yourself some grace. I think sometimes it's okay to work with people that we just don't connect with. And it's okay after a period of time of trying to connect with someone to sort of let it go. I know that's probably not what you expected me to say, but I think a lot of times we spend so much trying to connect with people that we just don't connect with, that we don't have anything in common. We forget the people that we do. And it's okay to kind of say, I will be cordial and civil and I will get along with this person, but I don't have to be friends with this person. It's okay. We just, we work together and we work well together. And it's okay that that's the extent of our relationship. We know we focus a lot of times thinking we have to connect with everybody, and we don't. So that's my advice to you. If you guys have some different advice to give, please, share that. But that's my advice is really, it's okay not to connect with someone. That's fine to do. All right. So the other question that I have, I'm trying to pull out some questions that are sort of related to each other. We've got about 15 questions, so that's actually really great. Oh, okay. So this question is really about okay, this is a fun question. I'm laughing because I didn't see all the questions in advance. That was intentional. So this question's about, so we're kind of closed off in a pandemic. I'll actually read the question. So we can't go anywhere. We can't do anything. And this question doesn't have a name attached to it. And I'm trying to figure out things to do for the weekend to kind of spice up my weekend with my girlfriend. So can you give me some suggestions of things that we can do without having to go out? Because I think I've exhausted all of them. That's pretty funny. Well, I will tell you, it is kind of a difficult thing when you're sort of, and I'm going to use this and I don't mean it to be in a negative, but trapped in the house with your family. And you kind of are like, okay, we've done everything humanly possible. We've cleaned the house, we've hung out, we've played board games, we've done puzzles, we've done all these kind of things. So one of the things is that I notice that people aren't doing with their family that would be kind of a cool thing and kind of a romantic thing to do is play 20 questions. It's a great opportunity to get to know your spouse, significant other, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, partner, by playing 20 questions. You pick a category in terms of decades. So I actually did this this weekend with my husband, and it was actually a lot of fun. So what we did is that we picked a category of the 80s, which now I'm showing exactly how old I am. And so we talked about different things, that 20 questions based on the 80s. And we discovered that he's really much better in terms of music in the 80s than I am. Like, I know a lot of music, but I don't know the artist. And I'm much better in terms of 80s fashion questions. And that was actually a lot of fun, and it was a great way to connect. So I would say do those type of things, find different questions or would you rather, games that you can play, two people can play. And then don't forget to have some fun in terms of a picnic indoors. Think a little bit outside of the box, especially it's February and we have Valentine's Day coming up. And a lot of times people, go out. And so you won't be able to do that. So think about some things that you can do indoors, like a picnic in the living room. The 20 questions. And then also too, you can also have some fun with music. You can have each of you sort of create a playlist, and then you can share that playlist with each other. So those are some fun, creative things. And if anybody else has some ideas, throw them in the chat for our anonymous who didn't want to be named there. Okay, so the other question that we have is, I'm trying to figure out how my team is doing in terms of the work that they're doing. Like, are they successful? Typically, I'd be able to walk around the office and have conversation. And because we're virtual, I'm struggling with how to really be able to observe them at work. That's a really great question in terms of how do we observe things that we're not able to observe anymore at work. And I will tell you that I've had a couple of people tell me different things that they've been able to do with their teams. And some of those things are they've opened up a Zoom meeting and they've left it open so that people are working while they have the Zoom on, and then they can interrupt almost like as if they're in a cubicle situation. They can sort of open up and say, hey, I'm struggling with this, or I have a question about this. The other thing is going back to those one-on-one meetings where you're having conversations really targeted to maybe a specific client or a specific project, and you're able to have conversations with your team about that. So that's another way you can do that. The truth is, this platform is never going to replace a walkabout. I mean, it's just really hard to do. So some of this you have to recognize that you have to trust the people that you work with and trust that they are doing the right thing and they're working. And so you've got, as a manager, have to really be comfortable and build that trust with them so that they can come to you if they have problems. That's really the safest way I can say this. So we've been on for about 26 minutes and I'm going to be signing off soon, but I had a really cool thing happen to me this morning. I went to a networking event, and it was sponsored by a gentleman named Ron Harvey, who's an amazing consultant and coach. And Ron is the vice president of Global Core Strategies. And his ask for us today is what I'm going to give to you guys today, which is I'd like you to think of 3 things that you could do for someone this week that they are not required to pay for or pay you back for. So some act of kindness or service that you could do for someone today, different people today, or not just today, but this week. And 3 things. So Ron said, do 3 things for 3 different things for someone or a group of people today that they don't have to pay you back for, that you're just doing because you know it's the right thing to do and it's out of kindness. And I think that's such a cool thing. And so that's what I will leave you guys with today, is to do 3 things for someone that you didn't have to do. So thank you guys who have been watching live, and we're going to be live every Monday. So submit your questions, or if you want to jump on for comments. Next Monday, we'll actually have someone that I'll be interviewing who is the guru of virtual marketing. So if you've got virtual marketing questions, she is going to be amazing. Her name is Victoria Huff, and you're going to love her. So that'll be what we'll be doing next Monday. And I'll see you guys next Monday, and have a great rest of the week. Bye.